Hey, you're back with Andrew, and my name is Andrew Loz, and I'm the host of the Untitled SEO Podcast. One of the things we like to do in this season 3 of the podcast is something I call LAN, which is Live Action Networking. I find interesting people out in the world, or they find me, and I bring them onto the podcast for a chat. Now, one of my favourite types of people, I don't know if I call them types of people, one of my favourite professions to talk to is copywriters. So I have a guest here today, an honoured guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Jake. I'm a copywriter. I've been copywriting for the past 3 years now, and I met Andrew through copywriting. And then, I've been lucky enough to be invited on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Excellent. So I'm going to say straight off the bat, this is Jake Perry. So
Jake Perry.
Just to make sure anyone listening can find you, of course, there'll be links in the show notes. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you is I think your journey into copywriting has been quite interesting, because there's not many people who sort of are at school and say, I want to be a copywriter, and then study to be a copywriter, and then leave school and do that. So your initial journey into the world of work, can you tell us, did you go to university? Give us a very, very kind of short version of your academic career.
Yeah, I mean, I just did the normal things, went to school, got all right grades, went to university, Liverpool University, studied pharmacology,
Wow.
Liverpool University. And then kind of through uni, I got interested in books and reading books. And I've always thought to myself, wow, it'd be cool to be a writer, But I've got dyslexia, so I was holding myself back saying, oh, I can never be a writer, Anyway, I kind of came across a few different resources, read a few different books, and I've always been into traveling. And I came across the 4-hour work week. I'm sure you've heard
classic.
of the 4-hour work week.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So I came across the 4-hour work week and a little bit skeptical, So I just got into this cycle of I'd work a job where I'd be like, the first day I'd be like, how long do I have to work here until I can quit?
On the first day.
Literally
Wow.
every job. And from all of my peers around me, they seemed to just kind of get on with it. Like that was the plan for life. But for me, it just didn't seem like it would fulfill me in the long term. So I tried setting up different businesses and things like that. And then they all seemed to fail,
What sort of businesses did you try?
So I set up some websites in terms of drop shipping. Now that I think you need a little bit of capital to get that going. It's kind of failed.
One of sort of 4 or 5. I don't want to say get rich quick, because it's a bit beyond that, but it is one of the classic first businesses.
Yeah, exactly. I then was living in Australia and I set up. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but essentially you can extract free bets from bookmakers and make money from it. It's called match betting.
Okay.
So I did that, but then I came across you're not allowed to advertise betting services within Australia unless you get the licenses for every single state.
Wow.
And I didn't have the money to do that or the resources, so that ultimately failed. But it was a really good business that could have done well if I'd have had the resources. So then I just continued this cycle. I worked in sales in Manchester at a company called Iris. And then I quit that job because I just wasn't happy. I came traveling to Mexico, which is where I live now.
You're very casually dropping in a couple of things there. So first we're saying, I just did the same thing everyone else did. I went to university, and then you said you studied pharmacology. That's not a standard thing that people study, is it? What led you? I know you didn't choose pharmacology in the long run, but what was it that interested you in it in the first place?
I've just always been really interested in science. And the thing that interested me about pharmacology is learning about these pharmaceuticals that it just amazes me. So say that you've got a headache and you take a paracetamol, it goes away. Why? But then also if you've got something wrong with your toe and you take a paracetamol, it goes away. It's like, how does that work, And that just blew my mind. It blows my mind that we've found these things that can do that. and that's what led me down the pharmacology path.
There's certain things that I look out for because obviously I run an SEO agency, and I will always champion copywriters. I think, in fact, an SEO agency in some ways can be judged, their quality can be judged on the quality of the copywriters who they work with. And there's certain things I look for when I meet a copywriter, and one of them is how curious is their mind, how interested are they. So kind of you in pharmacology makes total sense. You know, that's such a that's such an immediate win for me, that it shows that you're going, how does this work? Whereas most people would just take the paracetamol, you're kind of going, but how? So that's a really cool thing. I think it's a real skill. Well, not a skill. Is it a personality trait, or is it something you develop?
I think I've always, so for me personally, I don't know about anyone else, but I can talk about myself personally. I've always been extremely curious. I used to, I have this memory of being quite young, and my dad would take me to running training when I was younger. And on the way home, I would always, it'd be question after question after question after question after question. And for some reason, my dad always knew the answer to these questions that I
Oh
had.
wow!
I mean, now growing up, I know that he doesn't know the answers to everything. But as a kid, my curiosity was there, and he could always answer these questions for me. And then that then led into books, and then now on to copywriting, which is great. And I get to learn a lot of different niches that I would probably never read up on if I wasn't working in this sector, I suppose.
It's very much one of the things that I love about SEO. I've started several companies as well over many years, and I have a business coach who sort of made me really study why I kept doing that. And it's the learning. It's not really starting the business, it's the learning about the business. So in SEO, I believe it's unethical to work with two companies who are in the same niche. So that just means I've got a lot of learning to do all the time. Something else I want to just pick up on, you casually dropped into, I was living in Australia at the time. Again, that's not another standard thing to do, kind of on leaving university. So what was the draw with Australia?
I don't know. I just remember seeing it on the map when I was quite young. In it must have been high school, primary school, and I always would say to my mum, "I'm going to move to Australia one day." It just had this pull for me. And then when I finished uni, me and my girlfriend moved over there. We only stayed for a year, but yeah, it was awesome.
The way you
I've done
talk, sorry, the way you talk, only a year. You were still the other side of the world for a year and started several businesses. I'm definitely kind of, it's really developing this profile of that I have of you, of somebody who's got an incredibly adventurous, curious mind. Who
yeah,
I think you should be a copywriter. You are a copywriter, and that I want to celebrate that.
yeah. And copywriting is the first job that I've actually got into and thought this is going to be something that I want to do for a very long time. But I've travelled to quite a lot of different countries because it just interests me looking at different cultures and seeing new places. I think a lot of people tend to stay within the little bubble, whereas I've never been that person that wants to just stay within the hometown. And I don't know, I just like to go and explore the world, I suppose.
It's the Bilbo Baggins thing. There's a whole world out there that I want to explore. So, what other countries have you lived in?
So I currently live in Mexico. I've lived in Australia, the UK. I've lived in a few different places in the UK, so Manchester, London, my hometown Wigan. And I mean, it depends what you define as living in. I've been on long stint trips to Asia,
Hmm.
um, but I wouldn't say that's like living. That's only a few months at a time, I suppose.
So this is kind of like well, the phrase is digital nomad. Is that kind of what you mean? So you're still working while you're traveling around.
Well, it was initially a cycle of work, save up, go and travel, spend all my money, come back, and then work a job I hate again.
Mm.
But then when I came to Mexico a few years back, I met a girl who was a writer. And obviously, I was interested in books, I was interested in writing, and my ears pricked up. And I just sat down with her and I said, "Look, I'd love to become a writer. I don't think I can because I'm dyslexic, but tell me how you did it. How did you get into this initially? And I just did exactly what she told me. I wrote her an article so she could review it to see if there was anything there. And she said, yeah, there's something there. There's obviously mistakes in there and you can get better, but just keep going and get onto. So I started using a platform called Upwork.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I initially started. And within kind of a week or so, I had my first client. And then 3 years on, I'm I'm now running a business with multiple clients and doing all right. It's nice to not be restricted to a location because I can do everything on my laptop.
I just want to pick up something that you said there that I think is really important for anyone considering being a copywriter. First of all, I think if you want to be a copywriter or a writer, you already are. There are qualifications, but speaking as someone who hires copywriters, we don't care about those at all. But if you've got the desire to do it, you are already a writer, unless you literally cannot use a computer keyboard. Everything after that is varying degrees of how well you understand the client and how much you enjoy the work. So something you said about, I wrote this article for this friend, and of course it had mistakes in it. I think that's key, absolutely key. Nobody expects a copywriter to hand over 100% perfect work. I'm sure it's possible, and I'm trying to remember. I think when you worked for us, I don't think we had to do anything to it, but it's that barrier to entry thing. So it's the dyslexia thing as well. I want to mention because I've got several friends and writers I work with who are dyslexic. So how does that affect your work? Obviously, it doesn't slow you down.
So it's quite. I mean, I make a lot of spelling mistakes. I'm probably slower at reading than most people as well. But with computers, it's so easy because everything's you're able to spell check. So I use a software called Grammarly, which
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure you've heard of and most people have heard of by now. But that just picks up on anything that I spell wrong, and I just go through the articles as I'm going, and as I'm making spelling mistakes, and it just corrects them.
I think that it's. I wanted to talk to you about tools because there's sometimes a weird purity that people think copywriters or any sort of writers should have, and I think it's such complete nonsense. I mean, I write and have written for many years. I've written books and all that stuff, and there's never a direct line between writing something and it being published. There's always people involved. There's always people who check things. So this idea that you shouldn't use Grammarly if you're a proper writer, that's just absolute silliness. I find it absolutely bizarre. It'd be like saying, "Oh, I drive a car, but I'm not going to use the speedometer because a proper driver should just know how fast the car is." Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. Why would you not use it if it's there? Because you can even make a typo,
Mm.
even if you know how to spell the word.
Well, we've
So,
got Bex who works for us, who is a qualified proofer, and when she writes something, I have to proof it because even though she's a professional, you just can't. You can't. It's not very easy to proof your own work because your brain sort of makes the same mistake when you try and read through your own work. Yeah, it's an interesting. So, what other tools do you use?
um, it's nice and easy to search things up on Google, but it's a little bit slow because you've got to go to multiple URLs, check different to get the information. So I do use ChatGPT as like a researching tool.
Hmm.
It's completely sped up the work over the past year or so. It's a little bit worrying to think what it's going to be like in 5 years and if I'm going to be out of a job. But that's something that we'll see progress, I suppose.
I genuinely don't think it'll happen, and I say that I'm considerably older than you. I mean, I'm not just guessing here, but I've seen these kind of tools come about, and everyone think, "Well, that's it, it's over." I've seen it so many times, and the saving grace is that if you're a creative, you'll always be able to spot good output from bad output. So they'll never. I don't think there can ever not be a human involved. And your writing journey, the way you've come to writing and you're traveling and everything is such a huge list of ingredients that come together for any creative output that you generate. That I'm just not convinced. I mean, I could be eating my words and living in a cardboard box in a few years, but I don't see it happening.
Well, yeah, it's not creative, is it? I've been a little bit worried about this, so I've been done a little bit of research on it, and I read so back when the internet came out. I don't know, was it in the 60s or something?
Mm.
And apparently, lawyers at that point were like, "Oh God, we're all going to be out of a job." You know, everyone can just look the law up on the internet now, and they'll be able to they'll be able to find anything that they need. But obviously, that's not happened with lawyers, and there's still lawyers, and you still need a lawyer. So hopefully, that'll be the case with things like ChatGPT and AI. They're not creative, but they are progressing exponentially. So
Mm.
it's worrying, but you've just got to take things as they come.
We'll, we'll,
And for
we'll
now,
ju-
they're helpful to use.
yeah, we'll just see how it goes. I mean, I started building websites in Notepad. Actually every single little bit of HTML was typed by me. And then when things like WordPress came along, loads of people just go, "Oh, we're out of a job now." And like, no, you're not. It just means you haven't got to do all that real horrible grubbing around in the dirt kind of work. Now you can sort of view these things from a sort of a more intellectual angle. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to seeing, how this happens. So people like your good self who have the skills to bring information together into an article, what you'll do if you no longer perhaps have to do the real basic stuff, that you'll just create more and more interesting work. So I think it'll elevate, because you're not paid by keystroke. You're paid, according to, it's just this intangible thing with a good copywriter.
Yeah,
It makes it really difficult for us to choose who does kind of which job sometimes, because we're like, oh, that person's really good at abstract concepts, but that person's really good at bringing the humanity out in industrial devices or something. I think it's all very, very interesting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely helpful for now. Um, but yeah, we'll just have to see how it progresses, and I suppose you can always pivot in terms of allowing something to take over a part of your role, and then you
Mm.
focus in more on the creative side of things, like you just said, to then create even better content, I suppose.
Jake, there's something I want to come back to that you mentioned at the beginning, that you were in Mexico. Just out of interest, do you do you live in co-working spaces, or do you just find somewhere to live?
So initially, I was traveling, so I was going to like hostels, Airbnbs, things like this. So yeah, I would be in co-working spaces, but have over the past 2 years, I've been living in one specific. Well, I've lived up in a place called Puebla, and then I've recently moved over the past 6 months down to a place called Puerto Vallarta. So I've got my own little workspace in my
Oh,
house.
cool.
Yeah,
So we're not doing video for this one, but is this your workspace? You can see behind you.
yeah. This is my workspace
It
and my
looks
desk.
amazing. I'm always surprised how many timber buildings I see in conversations I have with people in Mexico. I've got a few people who work with us who are. I never ring
Oh,
their
okay.
mobile phones because I never know what country they're going to be in. In Mexico, there's more timber beams than I think you see in Tudor parts of the UK.
Yeah, I mean the architecture here is quite cool. Lots of funky colours everywhere. Great architecture because they were colonized by Spain, weren't they? So
Mm.
they've got loads of Spanish architecture and cathedrals and things throughout the country, which is nice. Um,
So
yeah,
it looks great. So listeners, you'll just have to believe that it looks great. Um, I'm going to have to be honest with you, Jake. I have got a thick cold. I'm slightly struggling not to cough a bit here.
yeah,
But I did just want to come back to something you mentioned earlier. Sorry, I'm just going to have a sip of water. That's Vimto, actually. Well, actually, it's off-brand Vimto. It's like Aldi Vimto. It's probably called Vimtos or something.
yeah,
You mentioned earlier that you were traveling. You were in Mexico, and you met someone who's a writer, and they kind of said, "Look, I'll show you how to be a writer." Is that something you think it's important to pay forward? As in, if other people were interested in becoming a writer, would you just sort of go, "All right, good luck, mate"? Or I'm
No,
interested in your angle on that.
that is one thing that I definitely focus on. So coming from going right back to thinking about working a 9 to 5 and then not really being fulfilled with that. If someone ever says like, "Look, I'd love to live a nomadic lifestyle, or even just a lifestyle where you can kind of be your own boss," I suppose, I always love to help, and I put a lot of content on my website that helps people become writers. And then I've got friends and various people that I've met through my travels that have sparked an interest in them, and I think I've had 3 or 4 people that have helped actually start being a writer the same as me, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's one of my big goals. Is I do want to get to the point where maybe I can put like a course within my website or something, that people can use to then do what I'm doing, because I love it so much, and I want other people to do the same and be able to travel the world and explore like me.
It's an absolutely wonderful thing, Jake, and I'm fully on board with that. Part of our mission at Yeseo is just to help anyone who's interested get into it. I regularly, there's a few times a year, I get to start getting sent CVs from the local college and other places, people asking for jobs, and I'd love to be in a
Yeah,
position to give everybody a job. But what I say instead, like, I can't give you a job, but I can give you my time, and just speak to them, just encourage them to follow through on what they're doing, because I've been doing this for 23 years now. It doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. It just means I might be able to help people a little bit. So, Jake, I absolutely celebrate you for that. That's a wonderful attitude to have, and you are incrementally making the world a better place.
hopefully that's the long-term plan.
I love your attitude. Hopefully, we'll see what
We'll
happens.
see.
We'll see what pans
We'll
out.
see, we'll see what happens. It's all about incremental little steps, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that's a lovely note to end on. So thank you ever so much for your time. I really value it. And I'm going to say goodbye. Would you like to say goodbye?
Yes, goodbye everyone. And you can find me at jakeperrywrites.com if you wanted to have a little look at my blog with information about how to become a writer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.